I'll tell you a little bit about my firm, which is Hickman Rose. We're a niche criminal justice firm now. We're in London. We've got about 8 partners, 15 or so other fee earners, and a total of about 45 users in terms of using this system. Our practice is based around the criminal justice system, so we're dealing with business, white-collar crime for individuals and businesses, victims of crime. Again, those can be individuals and businesses, actions against the state. We aren't doing very much legal aid work now, so we can be acting for companies, we can be acting for individuals. Some of our clients have got pretty high expectations in terms of the level of service they expect from us and they expect us to provide. It might be helpful to you to hear a bit of the history, because you may be somewhere if you're not exactly where we are now. The firm's been going since 1981. We built ourselves up as a big, based on crime, general crime, bulk practice in London. By 2008, we were a pretty big firm. We had, I don't know, maybe 40 fee earners plus support staff on top of that. We had a number of offices, and we were largely funded by legal aid. We were, at that stage, completely in-house in terms of all of our back office functions, the accounting and the IT, a number of servers, 1.5 to 2 IT staff dedicated to keeping all of that going. In 2008, we took a big decision, a big strategic decision, which was to move away from bulk crime, and we focused on our city office. And as a result, we got a lot smaller. And at that point, in 2008, we outsourced our accounts department completely. So we were left with in-house admin, front, reception staff, but out-of-house account staff, and we didn't have any secretaries. So we were already moving towards a much more streamlined model. All of the dictation was going down the internet connection to one of those companies, and that really has worked for us. So we were moving away from providing things in-house. Looking a bit more at the IT provision, what happened in 2008, between 2008 and 2009, we were a smaller firm. We were primarily based in one office. We had some people working away from the office using our own, I say our own because we weren't having the assistance of any outside company. We were using Citrix at that point. And I look back, when I was looking back at what I was going to say for today, I look back at some of the emails, and we experienced all sorts of problems at that stage with the speed of the connection, with the line freezing, telling people to get off the line and go onto their local drive because they were clogging it up, all of those sorts of problems that you may have experienced along the way. It wasn't necessarily a very happy experience. In January 2009, we decided, effectively what happened is one of our servers became obsolete, and we had to upgrade it. And then we looked very seriously at what are we going to do. And at that stage, we weighed things up, and we made a decision that the way forward was to move to some sort of hosted server. In fact, it wasn't with London Cloud, it was with a different provider at that stage. So that was a big step for us at that point. No more in-house server, no more server cupboard, no more maintenance in the office. And then in March 2012, we moved from that provider, and I'll talk to you about why in a minute, to London Cloud. Now, actually, in between those two dates, we lost our remaining in-house IT member of staff, and that left us with a decision. Do we replace that person, or do we actually outsource the IT support within the firm? And we took a decision to outsource the IT support. So we joined London Cloud, not for the cloud, but actually for the IT support. We were actually using another cloud provider at that point. Might not be the most sensible way of doing it, but that's the way we ended up doing it. I think quite often we make those decisions in that way. We became increasingly unhappy with that cloud provider, but obviously we were happy with London Cloud in terms of what they were doing for us. And in March 2012, we took the decision to move effectively all of our IT to London Cloud. So that's both the cloud provision, the hosted servers, and the IT support. And we've been in that position since March 2012. So what I thought might be useful, hopefully some of it might be useful, is to talk about issues that we encountered and we thought about when we've made these various moves to end up in the place that we're at now. I'll talk about what it's like being in the place we're at now at the end, but obviously I'm reasonably happy, otherwise Paul wouldn't have invited me to come along today. And we are reasonably happy. So just some of the issues are up there. Reliability and service continuity. You've got to make sure it's going to work if you're going to take this leap towards the cloud. I don't know, is anybody actually on a hosted server at the moment? No, okay. So the big question is am I going to get the connection? Is it going to go down? And I think one of the most important things to get right is your internet connection. When we first moved to a hosted server, we had problems, and they were telling us the problem was the connection. So we upgraded the connection, we paid for a bigger connection, and that still didn't solve our problems. And actually, when we moved to London Cloud, we're paying less for our connection now than we were in 2009, and we've got a smaller connection. But it was around that connection issue that we had all sorts of problems, and we were told that that was the problem. And in fact, it wasn't the problem. It was to do with what was happening at the other end. So there's a whole issue I think you need to explore, and to make sure that you've understood and to make sure you've considered all of the options if you're going to make this move about the connection, and is it going to work, and is it going to work with what's at the end. I mean, you're really dependent on that, and if that isn't working, then the rest of it isn't going to work at all. You need to know in terms of your reliability that you've got a contingency plan. What's the backup like? I mean, Paul's talked about that quite extensively already. Security, well, we're all subject to the Data Protection Act, we're all subject to the SRA handbook if we're solicitors in this room, and you need to make sure that those obligations are going to be met. I mean, the issue about the backup was important for some of our clients who really didn't want their confidential material stored in the US. So it's those sorts of issues that I think you need to think about as well. Service levels. For me, I think that breaks into three parts. Hosting in general, which I've talked about a bit, the day-to-day IT problems and the questions that arise, and the big picture issues. In terms of hosting, it's about the connection, the speed, the capacity, the reliability. How do you ever really know that's going to work until you do it? The answer is, I guess you probably don't, but you can do due diligence, you can speak to the other people like you who are getting that service, and you can look for assurance of exactly what you're going to get from whoever you end up going with. The day-to-day questions, I think it's a bit of a leap of faith for those who've still got in-house IT support to not have a physical presence in the office. You think, how's this going to work? Is it going to work? I mean, you're relying on lodging a help request either over the phone or the email if you have a problem on your machine. Again, I think before you make that step, you really want, we certainly did lots of due diligence. Is this going to work? Let's have a trial period. Let's see what the levels of service are like. And I'll talk about what they are like in a minute. And you don't have someone at the end of the corridor to say, come in and sort my machine out. And if you're more senior up the organisation, you may be used to be getting a slightly better service than everybody else in the organisation. And I think that is a big step for most of us. On the other hand, once you no longer have there may be IT staff in the room, but once you no longer have IT staff from an employer point of view, you're getting some risk advantages the other way, I think. You don't have the financial commitment of employing people. You don't have all your eggs in one basket. You're not relying on one person to stay on top of all of the issues in relation to IT. And if you're a relatively smaller organisation, as we are and were, you can't really afford someone who's right at the top of the IT tree, because they're going to be expensive, and more expensive certainly than we could afford. So relying on that person for all of the advice and keeping on top of everything going forward, I think is quite a risk, potentially. So in terms of the big picture, we wanted our IT support to be able to give us objective advice, not just on how we are now, but all of the things coming along, how we can move forward, what are the upgrades we should be doing, what are the ones we shouldn't do. When we moved to our first cloud company, I think we experienced the problem that we were actually quite a small user for them. And we really felt that once they'd signed us up and the contract moved on, we were squeezed. We were not very important. and we didn't really feel as if we could, in the end, rely on them, or the service levels weren't good enough, and that's what pushed us to move. So, pretty important things for us. Integration with existing systems probably speaks for itself. We did have problems when we first went to the cloud. The system was crashing. I remember there was a printer spooler problem that kept causing all sorts of difficulties. It's really important that whoever you go with, if you make this decision, is going to deal with those problems quickly. Again, I think it's about an assurance and due diligence with that company. Are they going to? What's the service they're going to provide, and how far are they going to go when the problems happen? Future-proofing, flexibility, they probably go together. I mean, we have moved quite a long way, we think, in terms of outsourcing, and I think we'll move further. We want to push people out of the office to do more working at home. We want to reduce the office space. That's all about, I think, making the use of the IT going forward. If we had bought a server, then we'd have been stuck with the server. We aren't stuck with a server to do this particular function. We haven't got something that's too big or too small. For us, it's as simple as negotiating with London Cloud if we want more or if we want less. And they can switch it on and switch it off at a couple of hours' notice. So that is a lot of flexibility, I think. Definitely one of the big advantages. Cost effectiveness, well, no doubt you'll all do the figures. It is good to have just the steady amount going out. You know how much you're going to pay. The capital expenses are much less. Obviously, you've got your actual machines to pay for and your printers on site, but there's no big server costs coming up, and so there's no spike of that nature. It is more predictable. And then there's also the slightly softer costs about contingencies for in-house staff. If you're small, they're away, they're sick, they fall under a bus, you're really beholden to one person potentially, and I don't think that's the same if you're outsourcing. And the other issue is, I think, in terms of cost effectiveness and resourcing, is you get access. We've found that we've got access to people at different levels in the organisation in London Cloud. So we're not paying for all of Paul, but we're getting a bit of Paul when it's necessary, and then we're getting a bit more of Laura, who's our contract manager, who's at the back, and then we're getting a lot of the guys who actually do the day-to-day technical stuff. And that works for us, because it means if we've got a big decision or we've got a big problem, we can go higher up to someone who's got more experience and more expertise, and it actually does get resolved. And we found the same thing in terms of outsourcing our accountancy as well. Our costs, because we've got very high-level people in that organisation who we couldn't afford to employ, who can come in and give us advice about bigger strategic decisions, and then we're not paying for them all of the time. So I think it's not just a straight cost comparison. I think there are other factors to take into account. And then, I haven't put it up there, working culture. I think that can be quite a big one if you're in a firm where, I mean, you guys are all here today, but there'll be people back at the office, I bet, who aren't that interested in the IT fair or where the firm's going in the future of IT. I don't think that this, using the cloud is particularly difficult for those people, because what they will see on their desktop or their laptop when they power up in the morning and go and start working is the same as they will see now, unless you want to change it. So I don't think a technophobe or way of working is going to be a hindrance to moving to this at all, but something to consider. So, where are we now? Well, we could have cancelled our contract this month. We're not going to. Paul, okay. We've got a senior partner working in Bristol 3 days a week, a couple of days in London. All of our fee earners, all of the solicitors, work out of the office for some of the time, and that's usually from home, although not necessarily. Our accounts department is in Gloucester, where I understand the rent is cheaper. We have no in-house server. We've just taken a floor, or we've just ended the lease on a floor in our building, but we haven't reduced our staff. And we're actively discussing a more flexible approach with all of our fee earners. So we're heading down that route. We have found the cloud, London Cloud, to be reliable. There are glitches, there are problems occasionally where the system goes slowly or it freezes. The great thing that we have found is that that is analysed and we get a report, they solve the problem, and then they look into why did the problem occur. And that can be as often our fault as it is the IT. So for example, we found out which member of staff is always streaming movies at lunchtime, and that actually causes a problem on our system, depending on what it is. Or somebody has uploaded 1,000 PDFs into the cloud, because that's the way they were served, in the middle of the morning when everybody else is using the system. It's very useful to get a report back that actually tells you this is what happened, this was the user, we can make sure it doesn't happen again. So I think that's been a really, really positive thing for us. And we had a lot of issues when we first switched to London Cloud, because you're always going to have that, and we get a report every month. We have a monthly meeting with our contract manager who brings a report for every query that's been raised. I mean, we're down to a handful, maybe less than 10 a month now, of fee earners actually contacting the helpline and saying there's a problem. We've got a regular visit, I think it's once every 2 weeks, from a technician who basically comes in, goes round the office, have you got any minor problems I can help you with, maybe save them up until he comes in, and that's the way it works for us. And the help desk, I think this was a concern, but what we seem to have is a core group of people. They're people who've all been into our office, so we know their faces as well as their names. Our requests seem to go back to that same group of people. They are always polite and helpful, and almost always they can resolve things remotely, so they don't have to come into the office. We know for us, we're London-based, we know they are in London and could come in, but 99 times out of 100 they really don't need to. So it's been a positive experience for us. And we think of ourselves in terms of the IT stuff and the back office stuff, as moving forward, as being pretty light on our feet, as being able to adapt to whatever's going to come along over the hill, and there are lots of things coming along, certainly in our area. I'm sure there is in yours. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. So I'm sure Ross will be happy to take any questions from anybody.
We've got a practice management system or case management
Yeah,
system?
we do. So we do. And in fact, we're just upgrading it now. We're moving from one system to a completely different system. So we were on AIM and we're moving to ILB. Don't know if those names mean anything. But that experience is, in terms of the cloud, it's absolutely fine. I mean, it hasn't made much difference being on the cloud or having our own server, I don't think.
Yeah, we haven't
not a negative difference.
Yeah, we haven't come across a line of business application that we can't move to the cloud. Yes, virtual desktops. Yes, or virtual applications, however you want to consume it. We analyze the bandwidth before you move onto the platform, so to avoid, and we can demonstrate, so we can give you a test environment to test from your offices, to test printing and stuff like that. And if your bandwidth's not right, we'll tell you. You need to upgrade it or it's sufficient, one or the other. But you don't need big fat pipes.
I mean, I understand what you're talking about. The practical thing of having someone just come to your desk, sort it out, is very helpful, I think, in those circumstances. But you do get used. I mean, what tends to happen is someone will come online, take over your machine, look into whatever is causing the problem, and usually they're able to resolve it. They might require you to switch it on and off the actual printer, and maybe take the paper out and put it back in. But
Yeah.
It does actually work. It does work. I would be reassured about that. But we've got a sort of liaison guy who, as part of his job, liaises with London Cloud and can do a little bit of that. But actually, I don't know. There's less of those issues than you think there are if there isn't somebody there to call on. And a lot of those issues, most of them, you can actually resolve remotely. I know it's counterintuitive, but that has worked for us. Although I have to say, we did have the assurance of knowing that they were around the corner.